latest addition to the JSX line is completely different from what we've had before. Tell us a little bit about that and about the different application of this amp.
Yeah. Well, this one, I got to tell you, this one saved the day. I started recording back in December for real to make a record with a band called Chickenfoot, and this band has Chad Smith, the Chili Peppers on drums, Michael Anthony, and Sammy Hagar from Van Halen. And I knew I needed something different than my usual live gig, and mainly because in the live show that I do, I'm playing melodies and solos right from the beginning of the night right to the end. That's pretty much all I do. Very little rhythm guitar, and so my pedals and the way that I set the channels are all sort of geared towards that particular job. But with this band, it was quite different. I'm playing rhythm guitar most of the time, and I'm reacting to a very dynamic rhythm section. And we had been designing this for maybe 6 months prior to those sessions starting. And I kid you not, the very first day of recording, the amp finally arrives. The first time I actually plugged into an actual prototype of this thing. And it was preceded by the engineer, Andy John, saying, well, Joe, what are you going to play into for these sessions? Because we record all the basic tracks, everything's done live. And so I said, well, I'm waiting for this 50 watt to show up, and it comes walking in the door, and this amp really was the savior of that project, and it turned out to be the signature sound of the record, which is a very classic rock, very organic. What else would you say? I've got to really think about all the ways that I can explain the sound of it, but I don't want to make it sound like it's complicated, because it's not. As a matter of fact, it's very simple. We had my JS guitars, we had a lot of vintage guitars. All we did was just plug into the front of it and set the dials. And since some of the time I was thinking I'm going to be representing guitar parts that I'm probably going to overdub later, I'm just going to have to play them more dynamically to get the thing to work. But what we found out with the 50 watt is this thing about the dynamics, and maybe if I used another word or another phrase, dynamics means that when you play soft, the amplifier reacts by giving you a softer response. When you get aggressive with it, it becomes aggressive with you. And so that has to do with gain structure right there at the input. The other amps that we made early on, like the JSX, was a completely different design, where it was going to give you everything and 20 numbers more at any level all the time. It's a very different kind of an amp. This one here, being dynamic, was the perfect rhythm amp for that application as I was playing with Chad, Mike, and Sam. And with all the guitars we put in them, whether they were, you know, short scale or Gibson scale, whether I detuned or I was up at constant standard pitch, the amp sparkled, it growled, it could be soft. I could play a soft introduction, just manipulating the volume control on the amplifier, and then just turn up, and I could do a solo, it would be fine. And all the time it sounds pretty much classic and fresh sounding, an amp that should have been made in the mid-70s, that kind of a thing, you know. Because obviously it's got master volumes, it's got 2 master volumes as a matter of fact. This helps you out, so if you like the sound you got and then you just need that sound louder, you can set the controls up to do that for you, or you can have radically different channel selections if you like, because it is a 2-channel amp. I know that's a long story, but it's really the true story of how I discovered how the amp was really going to work. It was trial by fire. It was making a record, and having everybody in the band come up to me and having the engineer come out saying, "That is really great. What is this thing?" You know, and it was a bit nerve-wracking because we only had one, and usually, if something's working, you really want to have 2 or 3 of them laying around, especially if you're playing, you know, 10 or 12 hours a day, because they start to sound a little bit too warm about the 8th hour, you know, tubes being the way that they are. And then, of course, we follow that up with more and more sessions where Tim Yarney, the engineer, would come out, and we would talk about what had happened with certain songs. So there'd be a re-engineering based on anecdotal evidence of, on this song, when I was playing it like this, it seemed like it would be better if there was that much more low end or that much more control over mid-range. So we kind of tweaked this thing in from December right up till now, but with a live project, which which was really cool. Since we were recording live, it was almost like I was doing gigs as well as making a record. And any moment now, you guys will be able to hear the record, because the record's being released very soon. And I can't wait to bring this thing out on tour.